keep your cameras off and remain muted through the session until later. And as mentioned, there will be an opportunity for a Q&A session around 6:40. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat at any time, and we'll address as many of them as we can at that point. You're also welcome to come off camera later on at that point if you want to, but just remember we'll be recording, and this will be posted on our YouTube channel. If you experience any tech issues, please message me directly in the chat. And yeah, just some context around this. So this is part of our Business of the Arts programming. And this one, we specifically sent out an invitation to all of our grantees, our FY25 grantees, and about five or six replied, accepting the invitation. And three of them together had enough of a similar thing they wanted to share, but also very different based on their own experiences that were like, oh, why don't we have a panel? And we'll get into that. And so just so you know, this certainly isn't necessarily representative of like the full diversity of all of our grantees, and all the panelists may not work in the fields you do, but hopefully between the three of them, there might be things that you can find and apply to your own situation, your own work and whatnot. And yeah, we'll just go from there. So I'm actually just going to stop talking now and ask Jonathan and Rick, and keep an eye out for Matt, to go ahead and introduce yourselves and get us going. Let's just go in alphabetical order. So starting with Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Monaghan. I'm a DC artist. I create video installations, prints, and sculptures. I use 3D animation to create my work. I've shown my work at the Phillips Collection here in DC and also on national venues such as the Sundance Film Festival. And I've also done international venues such as the Palais de Tokyo in Paris. So I show my work in galleries and museums. I also have a public commission up at Grand Central Terminal right now. And so I work in the public sphere as well. And yeah, looking forward to sharing some of the hard lessons that I've learned in my 17 years of being a professional artist. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Rick.
Good. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm Ricky Scott. I'm a filmmaker based out of Washington, D.C. I am a DC native, so I have a big like affinity to the DC area, all things DC, whether it's the music, the culture, the architecture. And I'm the founder of Linsaff Productions. And I've done a couple of short films, some other work in the community, been involved in things like 202 Creates. And I'm just a big community advocate. So just happy to kind of impart some of my knowledge and actually learn tonight as well. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just in time, Matt, rounding us our introductions. Just yeah, share with everyone who you are and what you do.
Hey, name is Matt Maker. I have been working in DC for about 10 years now. I support myself primarily through handyman work and through commissions of high-end furniture and custom goods. But the business makes beautiful things and solve interesting problems. And then for artwork, I do a practice called the Make Fix Anything Project. We help anyone make or fix anything for free. And we've helped with everything from bicycles to broken hearts. One dude sent something to the moon. So that's what we do.
Awesome. Cool, cool. And kind of just to follow up on that, if you all could also kind of go on and share your creative or artistic origin story, whether that is like you went to school for it and you just kept doing it, or like you went to school for something else and you're like, no, that's not it. Let me pivot and like find something that I'm actually passionate about. Like, but how did you get to where you are now? Where'd you start? And we can go in. Yeah, Jonathan kicks off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So I sort of didn't really know what an artist was when I was growing up. I didn't know much about art, or certainly not much about contemporary art. I got in through art making through video games. I taught myself how to design and make my own video games when I was a kid in high school, and that led to a bachelor BFA program, which was for computer graphics. So it was a commercially driven program. So I went to college thinking I was going to work in video games or do 3D animation for Pixar. And somewhere along the line, I started to create work that was a little bit more challenging and a little bit more experimental than the kinds of work that you would see in like a portfolio application to like a Pixar studio or to a video game studio. And so I found a way to tell my stories in this context of contemporary art. I became very interested in showing at galleries and museums and in that kind of context. And so I've been then I went to University of Maryland for my MFA to pursue that more in a focused way, and I've been doing that ever since. So.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, let's just keep the same order for now. So Rick and then Matt, and we'll begin switching it up.
All right, sounds good. So my origin story starts in ninth grade at my English class at Oxnell High School. We had a Romeo and Juliet project, and the teacher said that you could do either in class replicate a scene or you could film it. And me and my partner were like, we're gonna film this and we're gonna make it like fun and exciting. Not only did we get 110% on that project, like it was the best score ever, it was actually really, really good. And I enjoyed doing it. So that stuck with me all throughout high school, all throughout college. I majored in communications and criminal justice, but my electives were very much film or very much graphic design, things like that. And that ultimately led to me getting my MBA and eventually starting Landsat Productions. So I think my path is just varied, but here I am.
Yeah, awesome. Matt.
My path in actually is political, if that makes any sense. It kind of doesn't. I remember seeing the wars started as I grew up, and I tried to go to school for peace studies. That I didn't get in any place that had a program like that. I was accepted as a journalist, and when I learned more about the world and the way it worked, I realized that journalism actually wasn't really the way to address things. Um, so instead, I tried to structure my life so that I could generate income on a very short supply chain, so I wouldn't have to be dependent on these. So I could control my participation in these global systems. And then, as I learned more about art and the way it functioned, I sort of moved away from gallery work and more into what we call social practice work, which is about trying to uh, change, work with the fabric of culture and society as your medium. And that's why education sort of became the tool to help other people. When we learn to make and fix things, the truth of the economic system that makes that thing is kind of embedded in the object. And so when we come together to investigate these things, it helps the community to sort of understand where they come from, what we're participating in, and then by learning, people then have a way to act on that knowledge.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I can definitely relate. Also went to University of Maryland. I was a dance major there though, and I just remember another DC native like growing up in the area and trying to also hustle and teach and choreograph on audition at some point. I just had to figure out something else. It wasn't the math wasn't mathing for an income, and so I eventually got into arts management, which led me here. But that's a whole other story. I'm curious, at any point, anything you can remember, and maybe not, I won't say the best, but what is one of the best pieces of advices any of you have gotten? And we'll popcorn this. We don't need to go in the same order this time, but yeah, what's a piece of advice that's really stuck with you today?
Just do it, literally. I was living in New York after college, and I wanted to get involved with the local film industry there, and I was a production assistant, I was an editor, I was writing stuff, and then I asked one of the directors, I was like, you have all these like cameras and audio equipment. How can I do this? How can I be like you? And he was like, just do it, Ricky. There's really no formula. No matter what your industry, take that first step and everything else will flow. So I've kept that in my mind whenever I approach a challenge, is just do it. That's literally it.
Um, cool. I have a follow-up question for you, but I'm going to wait for Matt and Jonathan to also share.
So everyone tells you like there's some good advice in terms of being organized and efficient, right? And there's people that I respect a lot that do that, and everything's an organized document. You have your documentation great. I think that's cool. Everyone will tell you that. But to bookend Rick's comment, I think the best piece of advice I ever got was one of my teachers. She said, "Just keep going."
Cool. And Jonathan, before you go real quick, I just want to someone had dropped in the chat help in putting some context to this meeting. So this is a panel with several of our grantees of the Commission on the Arts and Humanities who are just sharing some of their own personal anecdotes and stories about how they've managed to figure out and make a living doing the thing that they're doing in their own kind of artistic disciplines and creative. So the context is just sharing their own personal narratives, and hopefully other people might find things to relate to or learn from with your own creative journeys. So, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice that we just heard. I mean, I've met a lot of great artists. I've met a lot of artists I admire. I think a lot of them have told me something very similar, which is that, and this might not work for everybody, but it is helpful. You have to sort of look at it as a job. If you want a real sustainable career as an artist or a creative, you really have to look at it as a job, and whether that means you're setting hours for yourself, 9 to 5 or whatever, whatever that means for you, whatever you have to do to make it work. But it is, a lot of us think as artists, this passion, which it is, and it's something that we love doing, and we're going to do this whether we're making money or not. But in order to have that sustainable art career, I think trying to treat it like a job or like a business, and sort of look at it in terms of your time and how you value your time and all of that goes with it. So that's some advice that I've been told by several very successful artists. So.
Awesome. So I'm going to pull on that thread real quick before we go to some of the other questions we talked about in terms of just doing it and what that means and looks like to all. And I'll just share a brief anecdote myself. I remember one of my last classes at University of Maryland was like our senior seminar for dance. And our teacher at the time had a blank chalkboard and was like, okay, let's list all the dance jobs that you could possibly get. And we thought it was going to be really quick. We had no idea. And we were like, dancer, choreographer, teacher, and we thought we were done. She's like, but wait, like dancing where? Are you on a cruise ship? Are you in a theme park? Are you on like, and like before you know it, and then it was like, oh, but what about a photographer in dance? But then like, what are you photography? Is it archival? Is it? And before you knew it, we had taken the whole class period to fill up the entire chalkboard with jobs that we hadn't thought about until like, so I'm curious, when you're saying just do it, has there been any moments where you've actually had to like reframe and rethink what doing it means? Did it look differently than you thought it did before at any point? Jonathan, I see you nodding. Do you want to go ahead and respond first?
Well, I think that's also very good creative advice, right? And I sometimes, I think oftentimes, especially when I just have free time and I'm like, oh, I have to make some new work. Sometimes that is very difficult. It could be sometimes challenge, the creative process is sometimes just sort of, not being excited about what you're doing for a while, and you're sort of in a lull. And that's great creative advice. Just work, just make something, and that's also going to, that's going to be helpful as well. But yeah, no, I mean, there's so many instances where I've tried things, sometimes things that cost money, making sculptures or something like that. And then the result is just something that's not very good. It's just something that I wouldn't show, or I've had to destroy it or something. So it's, yeah. So, you do it, you just move forward. But sometimes, you move forward and then it's two steps back after, though. But you got to still keep moving forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Rick or Matt, either of you.
Your question where you said, does it not look like you think? When I was like a kid, I thought I was going to be an astronaut. You would have never told me I was going to be a handyman. And I had no idea that moving to the city, handyman work would be such a good fit for creative work, because you can sort of earn at a decent hourly rate and then do these sort of quick jobs and then have time outside of that to do your creative work. And I had always hoped that my creative work wouldn't necessarily have to be the income work, so that the creative work could just be what it wants to be. If that's any help.
Yeah.
JR, I guess I'm trying to understand the question necessarily. Is it more about work that didn't meet up to the standard, or just being okay with work not meeting up to the standard and accepting that as part of life? Like, what's the angle there?
I guess it really depends on you. For me, I know I thought as a performer in the area, doing it meant auditioning for anything, accepting any role, and whatever. And at some point I was like, oh, I realized I needed to be discerning about what I auditioned for, that I didn't want to audition for something I wasn't passionate about, right? And so at some point it began to like become this own filter where it was like, well, actually it doesn't mean just auditioning for everything. It meant like actually doing some homework, looking at the theater companies or looking at the work. Is it something I'm going to care about? So that's that's what it looked like, how it changed for me between like when I first graduated to like now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a really good one, and I may be biased because I saw a question in the chat, but Ricky in his early 20s, no kids, just a single kid in New York City, versus Ricky now, who is a father of two young kids. the hours I have in a day are far more limited, and I still have to run a company. I still have to do other obligations, and I'm actually okay with that now. And I find I'm okay with it because I'm like, okay, what's most important? Is this job gig that's coming to me? Is it exciting me? Is it worth my peace and my time? No matter how much money it is it really gonna fit with my life? And if I find myself saying yes, then I know that's it. If I find myself saying no, that's going to drain me. I accept that. That's my boundary now, and that's a thing being a parent has taught me.
And
Yeah.
how old are your kids? I'm just curious.
Gosh, 3 and 1.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. Jonathan?
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean that is very important advice. I think that's really it can't be overstated how important that is. The importance of saying no, I guess is how you can put this. And for me, I think the most important thing would be you have to set goals for yourself. You have to set goals for your career. And for me, at least, as in the visual arts, and so that could mean like I want to show at this museum or I want to show in this biennial, and you want to be very specific with these goals. And this was a great exercise that an educator mentor of mine, Sanalahi, made us do when we know he made us write down our 3 year goals, our 5 year goals, our 10 year goals, like what do we want accomplished, in 10 years. And and be very specific. Like I want to show at this museum, I want to show at this biennial, and so so once you work on that and you have those very specific goals set and you believe in them, that is going to help you figure out what kind of projects you're going to take on. Because if you're offered a show, if you're offered to do a commission, or if you're offered to do this and you're like, well, I don't know if I have the time, the money is great. Okay, it's not so good on this. Do I take it on? Go back to those goals that you've written down and ask yourself, does this opportunity help me achieve these goals? And if it's not a clear path from this opportunity to one of those goals that you have written down, it's probably not worth doing, And so this is how you can determine what it is that you want to work on and what it is that is useful moments of your time.
Sure. Curious, related to something you all have talked about, and looking at opportunities and having these goals. Something I feel like we also discussed was the difference between like looking at opportunities as something to learn versus something that is purely like a winning financial opportunity. Like you might not reach your financial opportunity, but surely like you'll still learn from something, even if it like might be a failure. Can you talk about any times where maybe like things didn't work out the way you wanted to, but it was still something that you learned from and still like made you a better creative or artist or business person?
I mean, I think to echo what I believe Jonathan said, it's like the importance of saying no. It took me a while to be able to break up with a client. And thankfully I learned how to do that. And, where it's like, oh, this isn't part of the thing. Like, I do need this money now, but at the same time, like working for you doesn't further me. And it's also going to like cost me mentally to do that. No is a beautiful word.
And sometimes you're going to have to take on those jobs that you're not really excited about, but maybe they pay pretty good, or like maybe so sometimes you're going to have to take on those, especially early on in your career. And so sometimes you just have to grin and bear it, and just do this job. And like this is like you're working on something that's kind of dumb, or working on something that's not very good, but hey, the pay is okay. And then what you're going to do is, right, you're going to save that money, and that's going to make you a stronger, independent, creative person later on down the road, because you're going to have maybe more financial cushioning or whatever it is, right? So sometimes you have to take on those things, but yeah, again, just having that clear vision, that clear that clear vision of what you want your career to turn into, that's going to help you make these decisions.
Just to echo that, I mean, I agree with everything they're saying. And failure, honestly, it's cliche, but failure is the best teacher. And early on in my career, when I was doing my short films and early work for clients, I thought I knew everything. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, this, that. And it'd come back and the audio would be completely messed up. Or I forgot to focus a lens. Or there was, weather problems or whatever, lighting issues. Each time I learned those, I was like, okay, this is a learning opportunity. You have to make sure this is part of your toolkit. So every failure, honestly, I've just learned to become a better creator, a very technical creator, and looking at all the details. So they're all opportunities, honestly.
And I think also, even just like, I want to say, we obviously want to do the best job and make everybody happy. But if you something really goes wrong and you can't make somebody, you can't do the thing the full right way, it's also a good learning opportunity to be able to just sort of accept that and move on. Like, regardless of any learning or anything out of it, just being like, you know what, that happened, and it hurts and it sucks, but like, we can grow from that, and that gives you so much more courage moving forward, knowing that no matter what happens, you're gonna figure it out.
Thank you. I want to go back to something before I really like where we're flowing right now, but money's come up a few times, and I'm curious if that is something that's has been a challenge, continues to be a challenge. How do you address dealing with money, either like personally with your own budget, now negotiating contracts, setting goals and expectations? What are some of the biggest challenges, but also some of the biggest lessons to learn when it comes to like the money part of your business?
Charge more. Charge more. People will take you more seriously if you ask for more money. I mean, I think especially when you start out, you're playing this game. You're like, well, I don't want to say no, so I don't want to price things too high. But there is a certain level of professionalism that is implied by a professional price. Um, if you have a friend who's got legal skills, write up a good contract. Um, they're Thankfully, I had a friend who was a lawyer who helped me out. I'll If anybody wants like a copy of that contract, what I use, hit me up. I'll share it with you. Um, it's pretty particular to what I do, but there's stuff in there that's good. So yeah, make sure you ask what you're worth and value your time.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, Matt, I was gonna say, know your value. I think that's the same thing you're saying. Like, you should know what the value of your time is, what the quality of your work is, and you should know that value at all times. And to your other point about talk to a lawyer, I do think it's important to have a friendly lawyer on your team, whether it's through a legal Zoom, just something where you could just always have ask that advice. Because I have a LLC, some people may take it to the business level. Some may just have a passion, but whatever structure you want, you should always have legal advice there as well. Um, and one thing I always tell people, young talent I'm working with, I always ask them, "What's your rate?" And a lot of times they're like, I don't know," and they undersell themselves, and it frustrates me. And I give them, if this is my first time working with you, I'll give you one chance. I'll say, "Hey, this is not what you're worth. This is not what this job is worth. Do you want to renegotiate?" And we go from there. And I do that because I was that kid, and I wish that I had someone telling that to me when I was younger, underselling myself crazy.
Yeah, I mean, just echoing the same thing. I undersold myself so many times, early on, and but I think, in terms of money, what I had to do is I did teach for many years. I was a full-time teacher, just because I had to, just because there just wasn't enough income from my from my artwork, from my art career, and I also needed health insurance and all that kind of thing. I've since been able to transition away from teaching into focusing 100% full time on my art career now. But throughout that whole time, I was saving, because I knew that this was the goal. I never wanted to be in academia forever. So I was just saving. I was always just looking for that right moment to shift my focus entirely. So sometimes it can take a while, but yeah, have savings, learn about all of investing opportunities and all of that. Always put away money. If you can, just every dollar, every $100 you make, put $10 away at least, and that's going to help you down the road, because it's going to allow you to take on more opportunities. It's going to allow you to take more chances. It's going to allow you to have more focus and resources for your creative process, whatever that is.
Thank you. Something else that's also come up, as well as in our own checking conversations, the value of the kind of connections you build and the relationships you've had. You already kind of mentioned some examples of it, but are there any others that come to mind in terms of like whether it's a relationship from like years or a decade ago or a recent one that's been a critical part of like a recent project or your work now? Can you talk about the relationships you build in your work?
Yeah. So I see a couple on the call, and I want to give Don Fong a shout out from 202 Creates. When I moved back to DC, I was really, it was the COVID was just over. I had a young kid, a young daughter, a young kid. My daughter was very young, and I was really eager to get back in the community. And 202 Creates seemed like the best opportunity. It was like a fellowship of other creatives, and you're meeting weekly to learn how to start your business. And the end goal was a pitch. And that type of connection, no matter what industry you're in, look for those type of things, whether they're online, in person, and you can meet so many people. My mentor in that event was just very helpful in helping me elevate myself. So networking is very, very important.
Thank you,
Uh,
Matt. John.
yeah, I mean, in the fine arts,
Yeah.
it's essential. I mean, it is so essential to have these relationships, to to just have a good professional relationships with a lot of people. And there's many examples in my career of even just artists or other arts professionals that have helped me out. Artists have recommended me to the gallery that represents my work. Um, I've had people. I just had an interesting story. I had a solo show in Berlin in September, and the curator that invited me out for the solo exhibition, I met her in 2008. So I don't know how long ago that is, 17 years ago or something. Yeah, I was just starting out as an artist. I had just had my first festival, my first showing of my work ever. And I met her back then, and now 17 years later or whatever it is, she invited me, to have a solo show. So we stay in touch, so just staying in touch, doing that work, developing these professional relationships are super important. Yeah, I can't, and sometimes, that means, you go to an art event, you go to a gallery opening, you go to this or that. You sort of have to treat it as business in a way. These are social events. You can have fun, but I think, if you really want, to develop these connections and you really want to capitalize on these connections, also sometimes doing research too. Sometimes there's, the people that are going to be at a party or this event. Maybe they're on the board of a nonprofit that's hosting a fundraiser. Maybe they're on a host committee for this fundraising party. You go to the fundraiser, they're going to be there, and maybe that's somebody you really want to talk to. Sometimes it just takes one or two well-connected people to have your back and to promote your work, and that can make all the difference in your career.
Thank you, Matt.
Totally. You're absolutely right. Especially in studying art more formally, and if you're really paying attention, you'll see that a lot of the art that's really big, this is not merit based. I know many artists in Central Maine that make work that's better than anything you'll see in the museums downtown, but they're just not tapped into that network, so it never shows up.
Alexa?
So I think it is very important, like you said, to map that out, to do your homework and meet those people. But in my life, you can do the kind of social engineering stuff where you try to get into with the right people, but the connections that I value absolutely the most were totally unexpected. And this just comes from always showing up as your best self. And my best friend at the moment, and probably strongest artistic collaborator, I met just because I had stupidly agreed to cater this thing on short notice, like a week's notice, and I got paid like $300 to do this catering job. 75 people, 5-course meal. We're super short time. Everything is understaffed. I show up, and the organizer hands me this dude and goes, "This is your sous chef." And I didn't even know if this dude knew how to handle a knife. And we just clicked. And that's my now best friend and kind of closest artistic collaborator. So, I guess it's always show up, always be ready to meet your new best friend.
Yeah, and one last thought on that too is, yeah, present your best self, and especially early on in your career, make sure you put in 110% on the stuff that you do, especially early on, because and this is very true for freelancers, in graphic design, things like that. I mean, when you do a good job, people are going to recommend you to other people. And I know many, many artists. I also know many, many freelancers who don't even have a website. They don't have a social media. They don't have any of this. And they're very successful. They have a sustainable career just from word of mouth, just from recommending, and they have more work available than they could take on, and they don't even do any of this, social media or websites or anything like that. It's just from doing a really good job and then somebody else goes to them. So yeah, so make sure, even if if you're going to take on a job, take it on and do it 100%, 110%, because that's going to result in more jobs for sure.
Sure. I'll actually also share a personal anecdote, if that's all right. I'd mentioned how I'd been like trying to hustle in like theater and acting and whatnot. Ended up as the production manager at Adventure Theater with my mentor as artistic director, Michael Bobbitt, who's now the executive director of Massachusetts Cultural Council. And he's actually the one who was like, "Have you thought about arts management?" And actually, even then, I wasn't the first choice for production manager. A friend of mine who was like way more qualified when it came to technical stuff was. And he actually got the job first, but after a month or so, Michael let me go and he brought me on. I was like, well, why me? And he was just like, you're just better at communicating with people. And it was like, and so it's like people who know you will also like know you and possibly see things that you may not readily see about yourself and see paths that you might not have imagined because of how they've worked with you. It's about 6:40. I do want to get to some of the questions in here and then see what else comes up. And then we'll also wrap up around 6:55 with some final thoughts from our panelists. Uh, so I'm going to start with Lenny had asked a question. Um, and again, if you don't necessarily participate in art fairs, make it applicable to whatever your field is. But the question was, what is your advice about participating in art fairs, like any of the 26 plus fairs in Miami during Art Basel Week? Thank you. Jonathan.
Yeah, well, I'll just take that real quickly. Yeah, I mean, I have had my work in Art Basel pretty much every year since 2009. I've also done art fairs in Europe, in Madrid, Brussels, several times. I mean, yeah, I mean, the way the visual art world is increasingly working is in this fair model, and it's very interesting because because basically the whole art world descends on this whatever place it is, whether it's Miami or Brussels, wherever or Basel, Switzerland, and yeah, and there's lots of opportunities for this networking, right? I mean, there's lots of opportunities for making connections, meeting people, putting a face. I mean, it's highly unlikely that you're going to work with somebody unless you've met them in person. And it's just, you could have great work. They could go through your website. They could have seen your work. But if they can't put a face to you, it's just much more unlikely that they're going to work with you. So yeah, going to these things, and sometimes it's a wash, like you don't sell anything or it's a loss even. But again, you're meeting people, you're putting a face, people are putting a face to your work. So it's, so they have their benefits for sure. And again, the gallery is usually paying for this, but still, I think they're important.
Sure. Rick or Matt would, yeah, any response to anything that comes to mind with that?
Yeah. So this is not particular to art fairs because I'm not really versed there. But what I would say is being a filmmaker, um, there'll be a lot of venues that I want to enter my work in or have my work considered, whether it's festivals, whether it's grants, and it could be overwhelming. There's like list of hundreds and hundreds, and I'm like, okay, where do I start? So this kind of goes back to what Jonathan mentioned earlier about knowing your goals and having objectives. What opportunities, what 5 to 10 opportunities make the most sense for you to make the most sense for a return on investment, time spent, you'll be satisfied with it. It feels passionate to you. So I would just say have that consideration when you're looking at these opportunities. Don't just go for everything. Be very targeted and selective because your time is money. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and I do the markets sometimes. I hate them, but they're also great. Like you go into it expecting to make zero sales. Also go into it expecting to put a lot of time and effort into like designing your booth because there's so many details to getting it right. So if you kind of set it all up ahead of time, like in your own space, and just look at it and figure out the way you want it to be, expect nothing of it because it's likely that that's what's going to happen. But you also might, like some of my best commissions have come from just sitting there all day not making a single sale, but one person likes a little thing I do, and then they pay me to do something big in their house. So, yeah, that's all I got on that.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got another question in the chat from Rick Go. Any recommendations on landing gigs? It seems that all arts industry jobs are slow right now with the current administration and or AI.
Trade skills are always in demand. Stuff's always going to break. If you know how to fix stuff, you're always going to have a job.
Yeah, and just another perspective on that too. I think if it is slow, and if just whether it's the economy or you're just not having a lot of jobs right now, I think that's always a good opportunity to go back and okay, take a look at your website. Maybe you can update your website, improve some things on that. Maybe there's other avenues to explore with these other sort of other kinds of work that we do to support our art career. Build on when you have that kind of downtime, build on these other things to help set you up for success down the road.
And sorry, John. And to build on Matt's point, Fiverr is a really good option and an opportunity. There's not only creative jobs on there, but there's lots of handy jobs on there. So I think you can get a good balance of those if you check that out.
What was that you mentioned again?
Fiverr. It's like I'll put the link in the chat.
Then you got what, Thumbtack and TaskRabbit. There's a bunch of these.
Yeah, and I think also something I'd recommend is any of the connections you've made, check in with them too. Grab a coffee with people. Some of the best paying gigs I have had as a performer came with like someone I did a show with at Cinetic who was hired by a medical conference to do a flash mob during Halloween of Thriller, and I was Michael Jackson. And I was like, I never would have I would have looked for that. I don't know like where I've seen that posted. Then another was a director who was directing a scene for a nonprofit that was doing something for a Chronicle of Philanthropy. So I think lean into your networks. Don't be afraid to like just want to check in and use that kind of like personal resource. Yeah. Oh, great. We got a whole, okay. Yeah, we might not get out, but we'll try to get to the rest of these questions. Don't feel like everyone needs to necessarily respond to each question too. And Mika, I see your hand raised, so I will get to you in the stack too as well. Just give me a moment. Paige Muller asks, besides buying art, how can art lovers support local artists?
Well, I'll just take that really quickly. I'm on the board of the Washington Project for the Arts. This has been an invaluable experience for me being on a board here. So it's just a way to give back to the community and, through my time and other efforts there. The Washington Project for the Arts is a great way. You could also come to our auctions every year, pick up work, buy work from local artists. So I have a lot of work in some of it. Maybe you could see my background from local artists in my apartment. So I love to, just give back that way as well. So
there's also micro philanthropy, like the Awesome Foundation. It's pretty cool. I think you put in like $100, and they fund these micro grants that are pretty easy to get that fund kind of the scrappy, really cool small projects. And then the other thing is just show up. Just go participate in these events. That's for a lot of the work. That's even more than the money. It's about developing that culture and that scene. Do some art yourself.
Cool. Next question. Tony wrote, I hear about the importance of the legal side. What about the financial side? Hiring an accountant, keeping books, everyone has to pay taxes.
It will really. So I also run an LLC. That's really going to depend on the nature of your business. I've tried a couple times to hire an accountant, and every single time it just didn't make sense for the way that my thing is structured. It was going to be extra money for me to do the same amount of work. So whatever you got, you just got to kind of figure out your system. There are definitely, like, if you're doing a lot of transactions, it might make sense. But for the most part, when you're starting it out, no, probably not.
And it really depends on how you have your organization taxed. So that's going to be like when you're creating your organization, there's a couple options, and that's going to be one of the main things you talk about with your lawyer, if it's what type of corporation it is. And once you have that solved, I use QuickBooks, which it literally just it automates every single thing that comes in. It's $17 a month. It does my taxes. It appends to my taxes. It's the easiest thing ever. So something QuickBooks adjacent, I would say. is a good virtual accountant you could use.
Cool. Two more questions. I'm going to read Freya's next one. Mika, you're going to kind of wrap up our Q&A portion, and then we'll get to final thoughts from our panelists. Freya asks, do you have any advice when it comes to networking, any key conversation openers or a way in that you've found to be successful?
I love just asking people what they're thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're at a film festival or an art opening, I mean, you can talk about the art, right? It's the art sparks conversation. Great art is something we talk about. So talk about the art. What do you like about it? Anything like that, and that's a great way to start conversations as well if you're at an art event.
And if you know who's going to be at that art event, kind of research them ahead of time. So you could, if you do run into them or have time with them, you could bring up those points and be, oh, it's a connection there.
Yeah. And I'll also share shameless plug for an org that we've partnered with, and it's also facilitating our next Business of the Arts program, which I'll share more about later. But someone started organizing a monthly creative meetup at the Eden, called a Not at All Creative Kickback, intentionally creating space where there are like different activities, prompts. So it's not just like a bunch of people standing in a room being like, what are we going to do or talk about? But it's a way to like be in creative community with some facilitated things to actually like create art together or reflect on it or whatnot. So I think finding opportunities where um, it's you're not just working hard, you're playing hard, right? It should be fun too. It shouldn't feel like work to be in community, even though it is work. So I think looking for opportunities like that too. Mika, why don't you bring us home for our Q&A portion?
All right, so broad question. How do we clarify our vision? Because I imagine most creatives have a really difficult time honing in on one specific way to express themselves. So maybe share experiences or moments where you were like, okay, this is my selling point, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great book called The Profitable Artist, and they talk about this, and this is it's very kind of corporate speak, but they talk about creating a vision statement, which is a little bit different than like a mission statement or an artist statement. Vision statement is more personal. It's not necessarily something other people will read, but it's something that where you just kind of start writing that. You come up with that vision, work on that. And then from there, that's when you come up with your goals, right? Like those specific goals, they call them SMART goals, goals that are like specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, so yeah, so there's like these, and these are kind of like, they're just lots of nonprofits do these things, SMART goals. They also look at, you do what's called like a SWOT analysis, which is looking at your strengths, looking at your weaknesses, writing down your opportunities, writing down the threats or issues that could come up in your work. Yeah, so just sort of assessing all of this stuff, you can just put it all on paper. It's a good place to start. I know that's very technical and not, kind of an artistic, spiritual answer, but it's helpful to write it, have all this stuff down on paper somewhere.
Agree with that. And what I did was I look at grants, even if they are something that I can't imagine I would get in my wildest dreams, even though I should never say that because I can do everything I put my mind to. But I'll look at like the requirements for those and they'll say vision statement or have these type of questions and I'll answer the questions and it makes me think deeper about what is my true meaning, what is my true value, and I use that stuff to help kind of I guess, hone my vision statement overall. So just looking at what other people, what other organizations are asking for, and use that to kind of help craft your own stuff.
Yeah, when I was in art school, we had to write our artist statements over and over and over again. And I hated it. And I still kind of hate it. But that is such a valuable process. Like writing is a way to understand. It is a way to like clarify, right? And it sucks and it's painful, but that does get it out. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And also the other thing I'd say is like don't be too hard on yourself about having to have one vision because like in the same like mentality, just keep going. Like you're gonna figure it out by doing it. It's gonna come out.
I think the only other thing I could add is regularly just revisit that, right? Like you're a different person today than you were 5 years ago. And so your vision is going to be different. Like it still might be aligned. You might have taken a pivot, but just because it might be different, like my vision of like who I am as an artist today is absolutely different from when I finished at College Park. But that doesn't mean my vision wasn't valid then. It was absolutely valid for the time I was in, where I was at. until I got to, another fork in the road. So I think just be open to um, your vision changing and honoring that um, even your past vision was still it was still a piece of you that still got to you to where you are today, right? And don't think of it as like somehow a failure just because it looks different today. Um, Final thoughts from you all. Anything you haven't shared yet that you would like to before we wrap up?
I really just want to say, just keep going. I spent so much time agonizing over things not working or anything like that.
One thing I had was also always be prepared and be ready for an opportunity because one hard lesson I had, just a quick story, I had a very well respected gallerist take me out to for coffee. And, after the, introductory pleasantries, um, he was just like, well, what would you do with $25,000? And I didn't have an answer. I wasn't prepared. I didn't like, he was just basically saying like, okay, if I give you a show, the budget would be 25K. What would you do with this? And I wasn't prepared for that. And so I wound up not working with him. I felt very embarrassed. I just kind of stuttered and I was just like, I don't know, I'll make art or something. So always be prepared, always be ready for that opportunity because they're out there, they will come. And if you're prepared for it, then that's when the good things will happen. So.
Or Matt, yeah.
Even if you aren't prepared for that question, you can say, "Wow, that's amazing. Let me think about that for a few days." There's always a way to kick that a little bit further and give yourself a little extra room, because that's such a wonderful question to get, right?
You're on mute, JR.
Rick, did you have any other thoughts as well?
Not on the question necessarily, but just overall, just don't ever be afraid to ask questions. If you see someone on social media or someone you know in like your daily life, peripherally, feel free to reach out to them, see how they, do things. We're all learning. People, I mean, I like to give advice, and I'm pretty sure I think people like to give advice. So, I mean, network and just keep joining forums like this. If you're a parent, find things you can do low travel, low impact from the comfort of your home, or try to find things that you can do on one afternoon of the week when you don't have the kids or they're preoccupied. But just try to like be, I guess, intentional in how you use your time going forward if you in the creative space.
Awesome. And on that note, I just want to share, and I'll be sharing a follow-up email with everyone who registered, as well as the recording for this. I'll include any contact info our panelists would like to share in social media. CH, we're hosting an upcoming social event, actually July 24th, for anyone in the area. It is free with a cash bar for food and drinks. And so, yeah, hopefully we'll have many more conversations like this. But just thank you all for taking time today to join us for this talk. I just want to say thank you to the three panelists for accepting the invitation to just talk more about this.
Thanks
And
for listening, JR.
yeah, absolutely. And hope everyone continues to stay cool, dry, hydrated during these summer months. And hope to see you at a future event.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.